How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Hope you all are having a good day. As you can see, I'm rocking the gift from Uncle Mick, but I am also rocking the TNA World Heavyweight Championship that my lovely wife gave to me for my birthday. Speaking of TNA wrestling, you all know that I am a humongous fan of TNA back in its heyday. It was my alternative to the WWE. And you all know that I'm very passionate about this company. Now, I've not seen anything of late. I don't have any way to watch it, but it just got me thinking, what were some moments that I really remember just witnessing that just got my blood pumping for wrestling as a whole, but more specifically, TNA wrestling. What were some of the things that stood out to me and that live in my mind to this very day? Well, that's what this list is. This is my favorite moments of TNA wrestling that I got to experience, and I want to share it with you all. So if you all are ready to quote the icon Sting, it's showtime! Let's get it going with number 10. Alright, so number 10, Sting versus Kurt Angle at Bound for Glory. Sting getting his win back against Kurt Angle. Now, Sting and Kurt Angle being in TNA together at the same time was something special regardless, but these two men were just an instant classic every time they wrestled, and TNA knew they had a gold mine because this was something, if they didn't have anything going on, they could just pull this out of their back pocket and be like, okay, what do we do for the next couple of months? And I know, Sting and Kurt Angle 3 or 4, and it would always be a great match. But what made this story so good was this was the very beginning of their heated rivalry, which would go on even when they were in the main event Mafia together. And this was all because Karen Angle just didn't like Sting for some reason. She was getting involved in Kurt's matches and Sting's matches because they were a tag team. They were the TNA World Tag Team Champions. And Karen was interfering in their match, and Sting's like, no, get out of here. And she's playing like the victim, like, he hit me. And then you have Kurt turning on Sting. They lose the TNA Tag Team titles, and then it's just a blood feud at that point. It got personal, especially what Kurt did. Kurt going and stalking Sting's son, and Sting being stuck at TNA, not being able to do anything about it, and they made you want to see Sting get his hands on the Olympic gold medalist, and when he got his hands on him, it was so magnificent to see Sting become TNA World Champion, especially at their WrestleMania. And it was actually something that would happen for the next 2 years. Sting had a streak just like The Undertaker. And what also made this match really special was where the match happened. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, a place that had something special for both men. It was where Sting was known as an icon, and it was also where Kurt Angle became the Olympic gold medalist with a broken neck. And these two had a great match. These two always had great matches, and it was just something great to witness Sting finally becoming world champion and getting his hands on Kurt Angle. So number 9, Samoa Joe finally becomes the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. TNA knew that they had something special with Samoa Joe, with this kid. It was lightning in a bottle from giving him this massive undefeated streak, almost going on like a full year. He was actually tied with Christian Cage. Him and Christian actually had a little bit of a rivalry on whose undefeated streak was actually better. And they actually ended up fighting at Bound for Glory in 2000. But the one thing the fans were wondering was, when is TNA gonna pull the trigger and give this young man the gold and make him the face of the company? Because we all wanted it. Every single time he either faced against Christian or Kurt Angle, whenever he got a shot at the world title, it just seemed like he was just getting the rug yanked out from under him. And then came Lockdown 2008, a very special pay-per-view, because it seemed like TNA was kind of maybe go a little bit more of an Ultimate Fighter type of route because of how they were setting this match up. They were really making it like a very big spectacle, from going and seeing like how each individual person's training was going to, them documenting and showing what they're doing in their training, and just how serious Joe is about becoming world champion, and having people talk in interviews, I think Joe's ready. He's hungry, he's young, he's ready to become face of the company, and I think it's his time. I say Joe's going to walk away. And you had other people, well, he's failed before, I think he's going to fail again. And when he finally got that win, it was a very impressive spectacle to behold. And they also treated it like, if Joe doesn't win, he can't only not wrestle for TNA, he has to retire from pro wrestling forever. That's what made this so special. And when we finally seen him hit Kurt Angle with the Muscle Buster to become the World Heavyweight Champion, it was just something amazing, and it is something that is going to live in my head forever. Number 8. Samoa Joe retains the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at Slammiversary 2008. It was already impressive to see that Samoa Joe became the World Heavyweight Champion. We all was hoping it would happen, and then it did. But something was coming up after Lockdown. The King of the Mountain match. A match to where anyone who has walked in TNA World Heavyweight Champion has not walked out TNA World Champion. Christian walking in, he lost the world title, I believe, to Jeff Jarrett. Kurt Angle was TNA World Champion. He lost it, and then when he went to King of the Mountain, he won it back. But no one has walked in King of the Mountain and walked out as World Champion. And that's what made this so special. You knew after hearing that Samoa Joe's the first person to retain the title in this match, you knew that TNA was strapping the rocket to Joe and they were going to send him off to the moon and he was going to have a lengthy title reign. He had some great title defenses in his first and unfortunately only run as TNA World Champion, but the fact that they allowed him to be the first person to ever retain the world title in this match, where usually it's very hard to walk out as champion, was amazing. And the fact that I got to see it in TNA Ultimate Matches or whatever, it had this match in it, and seeing Samoa Joe walk in world champion and walk out was amazing. I knew that they were going to not take this off of him for a long time, and it showed. He did a great job in the match. I've not watched it in a long time, but the fact that they always built it up like no one walks in King of the Mountain and walks out as champion, showing they really trusted Joe and they were not going to take this away from the fans anytime soon.
And now for something completely different.
Number 7. The arrival of the main event Mafia. Wrestling has been known to do factions from time to time, but there is only a few instances where it is lightning in a bottle. From the arrival of the NWO and WCW, to the arrival of D-Generation X in the WWF, to even that of the Nexus later on in the WWE, to what I am talking about now in TNA Wrestling, the arrival of the main event Mafia. Now, what made this faction so unique and different from the rest, there was something you had to have in order to be a part of this faction. And that was the fact that you had to be a former World Heavyweight Champion. And this group was made up of 5 individuals. The Godfather, the head of the Mafia, Kurt Angle, the Icon Sting, Big Sexy Kevin Nash, to Booker T, to the Enforcer Scott Steiner. These 5 men dominated TNA Wrestling in 2008 for a whole year. And I actually want to make a video just focusing on the main event Mafia itself later down the road. But another thing was with this faction, factions want something. The one thing that the main event Mafia wanted, they didn't really care about power or gold. They got those things, but the one thing that this group cared about the most was respect. They wanted respect from the young guys. And what TNA actually did with this is they actually sometimes made the main event Mafia right, showing that the young guys did not respect the ones who paved the way for them. And it was a very interesting storyline to which Kurt Angle says that the arrival of the main event Mafia and that whole entire storyline was when TNA was at its peak. Number 6, Team 3D turning on the main event Mafia. Speaking of this faction once again, this group had been dominating TNA Wrestling for a couple weeks, to where it got so bad that the young guys and the rest of the roster had to come together to create another group called the Front Line to combat against the Mafia. It was really left ambiguous on who was going to join the Mafia or who was going to be destroyed and sent packing home and going to another company due to the destructive force of the main event Mafia. And you had AJ Styles, the leader of the Front Line, going to Team 3D and being like, look, we need your help. Do not join with the Mafia. And it was really left ambiguous on if Team 3D was going to side with the Front Line or if they were going to take their spot in the main event Mafia. Because the Mafia, they were recruiting. And you have both factions in the ring, and then you hear the music. And you're like, no. And you see Bubba Ray and Devon in their suits and in their sunglasses. And, like, you know, they're getting in the ring and they're talking. And Bubba Ray turns his back to the Main Event Mafia. And he opens his jacket. And the camera's focused on Devon's face. And you can see he's got a baton in his jacket, which he hands to AJ. And then he pulls out another one. And then they just take it to the Mafia, showing that Team 3D has decided to join the front line and go against the forces of the Main Event Mafia, to where we would eventually end up getting a fatal four-way match in a main event of a pay-per-view. I just can't remember which one it was. But it made for some very interesting drama and TV, as you had some veterans being like, no, this isn't the way to do things. We are going to take a stand against this Mafia. Number 5, Bobby Lashley's TNA debut. This debut was probably one of the biggest debuts TNA has ever had, other than Kurt Angle and Sting. But this was also during the reign of the Main Event Mafia, and it took place at Lockdown 2009, I believe. Or actually, no, it might have been Lockdown. Yeah, Lockdown 2009. And it was after Team Jarrett had won TNA's version of War Games. And as, you know, Team Jarrett is celebrating, then the lights go down, and, well, we see this.
My story, you saw it. What in the world? What's going on here, man? What in the world is going on? Bobby Lashley? What the hell is he doing here? Bobby Lashley! Look at Kurt Angle's face! The multi-time national amateur champion, the mixed martial arts fighter, the former world heavyweight champion. Bobby Lashley comes out to the ring. Did you see the reaction, number 1 by Angle and number 2 by Jarrett? Oh, I'll tell you what, the Main Event Mafia had something under their sleeve the entire time. And look at Jeff Jarrett. He's going to wish that he hit AJ Styles with that guitar. He's going to wish he did. I see nothing but concern on the face of Jeff Jarrett. But is there a relationship between Kurt Angle and Bobby Lashley?
Seeing Bobby Lashley in the land of TNA wrestling was such a big get for them. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why it was so dang special was because we hadn't seen Bobby Lashley in a very long time. We hadn't seen or heard anything from him wrestling-wise. Last it was in 2007, and it was after he had a match with Ken Anderson, and he got injured, and there was talks of him coming back, but he got released. And then he went to the land of TNA wrestling, and what was so cool was, even though the Main Event Mafia had lost, they do a close-up of Kurt Angle's face, and he just looks so dang happy, and they're like, oh, well, look at Kurt Angle, and Don West, may he rest in peace, was like, oh, looks like the Main Event Mafia have something up their sleeve. And then Bobby Lashley disappeared for a while, but that is most likely due to the fact that he was actually trying to do both wrestling and mixed martial arts at the same time. And I'm pretty sure if he could have had his way, we would have had Bobby Lashley as the UFC champion and the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, but that didn't happen. But still, this debut was awesome, and it is something that is going to live in my head forever because it's just that awesome. Number 4, Kurt Angle gets all the gold at Hard Justice. This was something I remember always singing a promotion for TNA's pay-per-view at the time, Hard Justice, scrolling through Spike TV, waiting for Impact to start, or just watching Spike TV in general. And I remember just seeing the promotion for this, talking about how Kurt Angle had done it. He had won all the gold and became TNA's title holder of every championship they had. And then when I was finally able to start watching TNA after seeing this, I was like, holy crap. It's real. Kurt Angle acquired every single title that TNA had except for the women's division. But they didn't have their title yet at that time. But anyways, seeing something like that happen is once in a blue moon. TNA strapped the rocket to Kurt Angle and not sent it to the moon. They sent him to frickin' Mars, because having one individual wrestler, before Kenny Omega did it, having all the gold truly shows, hey, we trust this guy. We're putting the entire company on his shoulders, and he's just running with it. He's making home runs. This was such an impressive thing. Now, yes, he did lose 2 out of the 4 titles that he had, but that's because Kurt Angle didn't want all of the gold. The only gold that he actually wanted to keep was the World Heavyweight Championship, and he would eventually later on dropping the IWGP. But when Kurt Angle was defending all the gold, he was the TNA Tag Team Champion with Sting. He was the X Division Champion, the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, and he was the IWGP. Now, the thing that made this match so memorable was how Vince Russo swerved us. You had Kurt Angle having drama with his wife and her wanting to divorce him and everything, and him just being down in the dumps, like, like he's in his head, like he's not there, he's not able to compete at his grandest, and you have Samoa Joe making a mockery of him, like grabbing his straps and kind of like an old cartoon, like where he's trying to run away and he's just holding on to him, or pantsing him on live camera. And then we have the swerve, in my opinion, of swerves, having his wife at the time slide the chair to Joe. Kurt hits him while the ref's back is turned. Angle slam, 1, 2, 3. Kurt Angle devised a plan to become the champion of champions in TNA wrestling. Something that no other company at that time had done before, and something that needs to very carefully be duplicated, but not all at once. Needs to be duplicated at just like the right time in history. But that is why it is on this list. It is a monument in TNA wrestling. Number 3, the heel turn of Jeff Hardy. Now, when you have a wrestler like Jeff Hardy, he is somebody that is impossible to hate. Apparently, according to my coworker, he was more beloved than Barack Obama in 2007 or 2008, or one of those two. But the fact of the matter is, when it's Jeff Hardy, you cannot help but just cheer for this man. Everything he does for the fans, it's impossible not to cheer this guy. But what happens when the person that you love the most stabs you in the back? It's heartbreaking. It hurts. And having Jeff Hardy be the one to go to the dark side, TNA's version of who is the third man for the NWO, which was a group that Hulk Hogan was running in TNA called Immortal. Jeff Hardy was their guy. Seeing Jeff Hardy not only turn to the dark side, but he had a new song. He had a new look. He had a new walk. He had a new way to talk. And he changed up his wrestling style a bit. Yes, he was still doing all the high-flying moves every now and then, but whenever he would do something that the fans were getting into, he would pretend to do it and just be like, nah, I ain't doing that. And his promos were really good, and they kind of cut deep from what I remember, but it was a very short heel turn because unfortunately it did lead to the Victory Road incident, and I know that it's always going to be associated with the Victory Road incident, but I think that we need to, start looking past that and look at what happened before his heel turn, something we thought we would never see. The beloved Jeff Hardy joining the dark side, getting a immortal TNA World Heavyweight Championship, which I honestly loved, but hey, I'm a sucker for Jeff Hardy. Anything he did, I liked, so no surprise there. But seeing the fact that one of wrestling's most beloved heroes of the next generation turning to the dark side was something I'm never going to forget. And frankly, it was something I didn't see coming, and I don't think anybody else did either. But that is why it is on this list, and it is going to live in infamy. Number 2, the return of Jeff Hardy to TNA wrestling. Now, I'm not talking about here recently, no. I'm talking about when he finally returned to the land of Impact in 2010. It was during a very special night. TNA Wrestling had decided to go head-to-head with the WWE on Monday nights. And, well, what a better way than to have the return of the charismatic Enigma. You have this epic cage match going on, and it looks like, the bad guy's going to get away with it. And then we hear that music, that modest to the top. You see Jeff Hardy. He looks different. He cut his hair. He was in the Impact Zone. He was back where I first seen him, which was in TNA Wrestling against the late, great Scott Hall. And just seeing him climb that red cage, sitting on the top, being like, make and... And, they eventually did treat his return kind of like what they did with Bobby Lashley. I don't know if Jeff was trying to figure out if he wanted to go to TNA or try to go back to WWE, but he eventually did make his return. And when it finally happened, I was like, oh yes, finally, he's back. And the reason why I was wondering what happened was because when he left that special event of TNA at the end of the show, you seen he had a contract in his hand. And so I was like thinking, okay, when's he going to come back? And we didn't see him for months. And then he came back, and then we got the next Jeff Hardy, with eventually getting also him all acknowledging us as his creatures of the night. Something I thought would never happen, and of course it's always going to be on this list because it's Jeff Hardy. It's my favorite wrestling company of all time back in the day, and they were together again. How could I not love this? And that is why it is my number 2. We're down to the nitty-gritty, to the final number on this list. My favorite moment in Impact Wrestling of all time. And my number 1 moment is the return of the six-sided ring. The reason why I fell in love with TNA Wrestling was the ring itself, and then I would eventually fall in love with the roster. But TNA Wrestling just like struck me differently because of the ring. I had never seen something like this before, and I'm a humongous mark for the six-sided ring to this very day. Yes, I know that it is harder on the wrestlers' bodies, and I do not wish for anyone to be hurt, but I just love the six-sided ring, and I love the fact that in Ultra Pro Wrestling, we are finally going to get the opportunity to choose what type of ring we want to be in, and I love that. I adore the six-sided ring. So when eventually they changed it to a four-sided ring, I was very disappointed, but then came, and I believe to maybe 2014 or along that timeline, 2014, 2015. If I got the date wrong, please let me know. But I seen a post on Facebook, and it was, which do you prefer, TNA being in a four-sided ring or a six-sided ring? It was a poll. And I was like, oh, heck yeah, I want them to go back to the six-sided ring. And then they confirmed TNA will be going back to the six-sided ring. And I remember Kurt Angle was the general manager. They were in the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City, and it's black behind Kurt Angle. And he goes, well, ladies and gentlemen, you voted for it, you asked for it, so here it is, the six-sided ring. And there it was, the six-sided ring in all their glory. And you just hear Kurt Angle talk about how it separated them from the rest. It gave them a name, so we are going back to the way of how things were. And then he said, so ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for some TNA? And I was so happy. Actually, when I saw this post, I made a video about it, and that video grew to a very large number of views. I think that was like the first big pop in views I had ever gotten. But I love the six-sided ring. I do like that the wrestlers are being more safe, but it's just something that I enjoy. But guys, that's just a little taste of things about TNA Wrestling that I loved so much back in the day. If there were any moments that you liked or that you didn't like that I do, please let me know in the comments below. If there are any TNA moments that have currently happened that I have missed and that you want to share, please let me know as well. Do not forget to elbow drop that like button and spear the subscribe button for the 1, 2, 3. And I'll see you next time as we talk inside the ring. Bye guys, see you then.